This beauty influencer orchestrated the deaths of over 600 husbands and turned toxic relationships into a pretty deadly business model. The infamous Giulia Tofana was a 17th century cosmetic chemist, and she gave drop dead gorgeous a literal meaning. Dior? More like Dior. Her signature blend took beauty sleep to a permanent level, and Till Death Do Us Part became a poisonous promise. Grab a goblet, but check it twice, and let's talk poison, power, and payback in Old World Italy. I know a lot of you have heard this story from Bailey Syrian's channel. She does a hilarious job covering it, I think like 4 years ago, and I simply cannot let it go. Aqua Tofana. Giulia Tofana created something called Aqua Tofana, which was designed to, how do I say this, murder your husband. Yeah, murder your husband. Out of her storefront apothecary. An apothecary back then is basically what we view as a pharmacy now. We have unchecked patriarchy now, and they had it back then. Basically, women had a couple of options. You could get married and hope your husband doesn't treat you like absolute shit and beat the crap out of you, stay single and go into the sex work industry. You could become a nun, or you could become a widow. The options aren't great, so I get it. Was Giulia Tofana a serial killer, or was she a heroine? She technically just sold the product. She didn't actually administer it. Wouldn't that be like blaming Winchester for pulling a Van Gogh on Trump? Anywho, another gross fact, 13 to 14 was a very common average age for these girls to marry. Now, you might think their husbands would be, 15, 16. Nope, the average age gap was like 10 to 20 years their senior. Let that one simmer. So imagine being 13 years old and being forced to marry a 30, 40, 50-year-old dude and then immediately start producing children. And also, no, women didn't have rights back then. In fact, women were regularly beaten as a form of quote unquote discipline. Like that was totally normal back then. That makes me want to go do something super rebellious right now on their behalf. I think we all know what my next tattoo is going to be. So anyway, you're 13, getting your ass beat on the regular, popping out babies. You're getting all kinds of venereal diseases because your husband is allowed to put his pipe in anyone's chimney. It wasn't like these women were murdering their husbands for not putting their socks in the hamper. Although, who am I to judge? That's where our girl Giulia comes into the picture. Hello, Giulia. Hey girl, I need a favor. There's rumor that the recipe for Aqua Tofana was handed down from her mom. It's super interesting and I have my theories. But either way, Giulia essentially became part of this underground criminal, magical, witchy, voodoo, mama juju community. This was basically a bad bitch underground mafia. I'd be lying if I said that doesn't sound pretty fucking cool. This underworld consisted of a bunch of women and people, not just Giulia, and they provided services from love potions to spells and abortions even. We might actually be going back to that pretty soon. And of course, everyone back then was super hella religious, primarily Roman Catholic. Some clergy members were even part of this underground world, which I kind of sort of love. Not only was Giulia successful in this for over 20 years without getting caught, she turned that shit basically into a franchise. Religion was hot in 1633, and Giulia knew that. She would label the bottles as manna of St. Nicholas of Bari. I don't know. Apparently that was a popular face oil back then for like skin blemishes. So I kind of sort of went down a whole ass rabbit trail about St. Nicholas. Catholics, I don't know, man. That's some Patreon shit. Giulia knows that we're suckers for some embellished bottles. This is the closest thing I have. Look at this. I bought this for like $2 at a flea market. Now I'm growing a plant in it. The main ingredients for Aqua Tofana, I know you crazies are still sticking around to see if I will tell you, and I'm going to. Arsenic, of course, lead, and this other ingredient called belladonna. I didn't know what belladonna was, but I learned that it was basically a plant that was turned into eye drops so women could put like one drop in each of their eyes and it would dilate their pupils. Then I learned from that dilated pupils apparently make a woman look like she's in love, like blush on our cheeks to give the rosy, youthful, healthy appearance. Yeah, I'm not putting anything in my eyes for that. Sorry, I draw the line there. Historian Mike Dash described Giulia Tofana as a quote-unquote severe challenge to a world where men ruled as petty tyrants over their own families. I aspire to also be a severe challenge. He's saying the girl had some massive cojones. Clink, clink. The beauty of selling Aqua Tofana as a cosmetic, see what I did there, is that women could easily put it on their vanities and it would just kind of blend in. Blend in, right? All of her business came from referrals and word of mouth. It's not like they had Craigslist. And after she determined that someone was safe and that they genuinely needed this product for an abusive husband situation, she would provide the product. Urban Decay? More like your man decay. But she didn't just hand it over and assume that they would know what to do. No, 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 no. Not Giulia. She was basically holding master classes in how to administer the product, what to expect, how to handle yourself as your husband's dying, and then feigning grief once the asshole husband had passed away. And she always told the women to demand an autopsy. Now, that would never fly these days. We've advanced. But it was a very important part because if there was any suspicion, obviously these women would have been found. Giulia would have been exposed, and then all of these abusive husbands would still be alive. The woman understood, hell, she might have actually invented girl code. Before there was Walter White, there was Giulia Tofana. Now, Giulia wasn't your run-of-the-mill chemist because she had this formula figured out to the absolute upteenth degree. It was meant to take place over like 4 days. I've also read that she could have it calculated up to years in advance. Another little perk of this being a slow acting poison is that it allowed the time for the dying victim to ready their will. It allows everyone time to just clear their conscience. They're Roman Catholics, obviously, they can get their soul right with God, but I kind of hope that these abused widows got their bag. Giulia's family would probably still be receiving residuals had someone not broken girl code and opened their big fat mouth. Rumor has it that someone snitched on Giulia. This is why we can't have nice things. This is another area of debate with historians because some say that this woman put Aqua Tofana in her husband's soup, but before he had a chance to drink it, she stopped him. It's not Campbell's. What did he do? Took her to the authorities where they tortured a confession out of her. L'Oreal, more like L'Oreal. She probably wished she had just let him drink that fucking soup. Stressed me out hundreds of years later, I swear. I'm not gonna victim blame because girl might have had some Stockholm syndrome going on, or maybe just buyer's remorse. She ratted on Giulia. Giulia ditched town and sought refuge in a nearby church. Some accounts say that she continued making Aqua Tofana while hiding at the church. The grind never stops. Other historians argue that she ran and a mob came after her. She was tortured, she confessed, she was executed next to her daughters. There's also another version that says she was never found out and that she continued to make, I was about to say Aquafina. Why am I mentioning so many brands? I'm not sponsored by any of them. Run me my money. She continued to produce Aqua Tofana until she retired and then just eventually died. Revlon. More like Revlon gone. And that's the version I personally choose to believe. Am I a terrible person? I mean, honestly, it depends on the day and it depends who you ask. A lot of sources label her as a serial killer, which I don't really think is fair. Not that I think you should murder anybody, but women kind of had no choice but to take justice in their own hands if there was any chance of them surviving. So I don't really think it's fair to judge history by like our modern standards, but that also means I couldn't judge 50-year-old men for marrying 13-year-olds. No, actually, I'm judging that. I'm still judging that. So we don't really know what ended up happening to Giulia. We don't know if she actually got caught or executed, but we do know there's no portraits or pictures of her. And some historians have said that that's because there was something back then called, I'm going to butcher this, damnado, memory. A loose translation based off of those two words would be damn their memory, erase them from history. People convicted of crimes would have all traces of them erased. They would burn all portraits or pictures or things like that. Kind of metal as fuck. I almost forgot to mention that freaking Wolfgang Mozart, yeah, that guy, he tried to blame his death on Aqua Tofana. Now remember, this shit can take multiple days, even years, depending on the formula. And on his deathbed, he said, "Someone has given me Aqua Tofana and calculated the precise time of my death." Did they? Scholars actually support the idea that it was probably syphilis or an undercooked pork chop. Oddly specific, but that's a lot less romantic, especially for a noteworthy composer. Noteworthy? Get it? Sounds like a guilty conscience to me, buddy. If you don't want to be Aqua Tofana, don't be a shitty husband. Giulia would have started a new dating app called aquatofana.com. You can choose to be lonely at aquatofana.com. Happy folks just don't get it. I saw a lot of people recommending a book called The Lost Apothecary, a fiction novel based on this whole story. I've not read it personally, but I'm just throwing that out there because I feel like some of you are either going to recommend it or maybe you want to read something more along this storyline. I've heard the book is to die for. But what do you think? Was Giulia a cold-blooded murderer or a champion for oppressed women? I'm kind of obsessed with this story, and there's so much that I was like, I'm gonna have to cut from YouTube, and it breaks my heart a little bit. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and let me know if you want more like this. You can make your own recommendations, true crimey, historic crimes. What am I trying to say? Fill out this form, which I will show on the screen or it's linked in the description, and maybe I will do your story next. In a world where you can be anything, might I suggest being a severe challenge to the patriarchy? It's what Giulia would have wanted. Charlotte Tilbury, more like she'll help you, Barry. Nars? More like nar. Okay, I'm done. Cheers.